Hey, how's it going? My name's Liam, and welcome back to the Stardew Valley playthrough. Before we get started, I just wanted to clear something up. After the last episode, I received a comment telling me about how to find the missing necklace near the bathhouse, and apparently I need to fish in the pond outside in order to get it. So, sticking with the rules of this playthrough, I won't be doing that, so I just wanted to give you all a heads up about it. And anyway, let's get on with the video. On the morning of day 1, I found Kent at my door. He's Jodie's husband, and he's just come back from fighting a war somewhere far away. After that, I did some foraging and found enough forage to craft some spring seeds. In town, I accepted a quest from the wizard to kill 2 squid kids in the mines. I went through the forest where I picked some sunions before making my way over to the mines. I managed to find a couple of these squid kids, and just between you and me, I don't think they look like a squid or a kid, just saying. I killed the squid kids and used the warp totem to get home. And that's the end of the first day. The next morning, I cleared the debris around my fruit trees, since their growth had been stunted last night. Then I went over to the wizard and turned in the squid kid quest. In town, I accepted a quest to give Demetrius a gold bar. I grabbed a gold bar from a chest and took it over to Demetrius. And that evening, I decided to go down into the sewers. I unlocked the grating in town and went inside. I found a little guy in there called Krobus. He has a star drop in stock, so I'll get around to buying that at some point. But more importantly than anything else, he stocks iridium sprinklers on Fridays and Sundays, I think. Though I could be wrong about that. Anyways, I'll be saving up for a few of those throughout the season to make my watering can obsolete. Back on the surface, I followed the instructions laid out on the secret note and found a gold statue of Lewis behind his house. That's a little extravagant, don't you think, Mr. Mayor? So I'll be keeping it, thank you. The next morning, I collected my first rotation of fruit from my little grove. Here's to hoping they're worth the investment. After that, I grabbed some coffee and gave it over to Harvey. And back at the farm, I spent some time working on sprucing things up a bit. I laid out some new paths and put up some new seasonal plants. I also fertilized my trees and planted some grass in a few places where it would spread and make things look nice and overgrown. After all that, I went to bed, and that night I made just under 2,000 monies from my fruit. So I'm not sure these are worth it right away, but they are definitely a long-term investment and make a lot more money the more you play. The next morning, I watered my crops and grabbed some food from the fridge. I went over to the bus and bought a ticket to Calico Desert. While I was there, I found some coconuts and some cactus fruit, as well as this golden relic. I also introduced myself to Sandy. I bought this old rug from her before continuing on with my foraging. I followed the instructions of the secret note and found a strange doll. Then it was finally time. I went over to the cave entrance and put the key in the door. It was time to enter Skull Cavern. As soon as I entered, I was immediately swarmed by these serpents. I managed to defeat them and made my way down. On the next floor, I nearly died while being swarmed by all these slimes. I managed to wedge myself behind a rock and ate my stuffing. I managed to kill the slimes and even got a whole iridium bar out of one of them. From the next slime, I got a diamond and some more iridium. On floor 25, I was swarmed by 3 serpents, and before I passed out, I just bailed on the whole thing. Still though, that wasn't bad for my first trip down there. Back at the farm, I placed my new rug in front of the fireplace and went to bed. On the morning of day 5, I received a letter from Mr. Key, challenging me to make it to level 25 in Skull Caverns, with the promise of plenty money if I can do it. In town, I went down into the sewers and bought myself an iridium sprinkler. I also donated my new artifacts to the museum. While walking through the forest, I stopped at the traveling merchant and bought a rabbit's foot. Over at the farm, I placed my new iridium sprinkler in the middle of one of my crop pocket things, and I took a minecart into town and went over to the man in the Jojo truck. I gave him the rabbit's foot and received this special charm in return. Now I have a permanent luck increase, which should be great for when I'm in Skull Cavern. That evening I went over to the quarry and started properly clearing the whole place of rocks, so here's a little time lapse of that. The next morning I received 10,000 monies from Mr. Key for completing his request. So apparently what I'd done a couple days ago counts toward completing it. It's a little confusing, but I'm not about to send the money back. I also got a request from Emily to bring her an apricot. I then went over to Robin's and got her to build me a shed next to my trees near the pond. I also bought some furniture from her, including this little sun table. In town, I accepted a quest from Emily to deliver her a Joja-Cola, and while I was trash diving, I found some sashimi. So this just proves that Linus probably did find that sashimi he gave me in the trash. I gave Emily her apricot and also gave Willie some coral as a gift. On the farm, I placed my new decorations around the place and started working on the dining area for the park. I cleared the farm of all the debris and grass and laid out a few new paths, and that's it for day 6. On day 7, I went over to Emily and gave her the Joja-Cola she had asked for, and somehow I managed to witness one of her dreams. Also, I was there for some reason, which is pretty whack. After that, I gave her the Joja-Cola and went over to the sewers. I checked Krobus' stock and found that he had no iridium sprinklers, so maybe he only stocks them on Fridays and Saturdays. For the rest of the evening, I continued to work on the farm. I swapped some seasonal plants around. I also planted some more grass to line my paths, as well as to create little lawn areas around the well. On day 8, I received a letter from Emily in the mail containing a recipe to make a salad. I also collected my first harvest of forage. Robin had completed work on my shed, so now I've got a nice new place to do some work. So I got to crafting some bone mills and some more charcoal kilns. I set them up in the shed. I swapped all my furnaces for the lightning rods I had in storage and moved all my furnaces into the shed. Now I've got a little crafting and mining sort of area separated from all the nice stuff on the farm. And that's it for day 8. On day 9, I collected my second mini harvest as well as all my fruits. I also planted a new rotation of seeds. In town, I found this little chipped amphora, which I gave over to the museum. That afternoon, I decided to finally get started on playing Journey of the Prairie King. I died a few times in the first couple of levels and thought all was lost, but I managed to clutch the boss and got myself an extra life to boot. I beat the next level, but had to stop short because I had to go eat supper. But I think I have a good idea of what I need to do in order to win the first couple levels, so should be alright. After that, I went to the mines just for funsies. I found a couple of squid kids on the same floor, so that's cool. And that's it for day 9. On the 10th day, I went outside and collected my third harvest of spring forage. I went over to the bat cave where I found my first apple. This is great because now I can complete the artisan bundle in the community center. With that, I went over there and donated my apple, and this rewarded me with my first keg, which can be used to turn any fruit or vegetable into a drink of some kind. In town, I accepted a quest to deliver some quartz to Pierre. I went over to the Stardrop Saloon where I bought a few coffees. I found Harvey and gave him a cup of coffee. This brought me up to 9 hearts. Back at the farm, I crafted my first geode crushers and set them to crushing geodes. I decided to craft a few signs for my crops, and in doing so, I earned the artisan achievement for crafting 30 different items. Now this has also got me thinking about my crop layout, so I want to do a couple of adjustments tomorrow, and that brings an end to day 10. I checked the weather and noticed that I haven't received a single day of rain, and at this point I'm getting a little worried because I'm running low on batteries, which I need for a few things on the farm. I went outside and collected my mini harvest and worked on my crop layout by adding another fence in and another sign. I didn't find too many interesting things when I checked my geode crushers, but I did get some coal back. In town, I went into Pierre's and witnessed whatever this was. I promised Harvey that I wouldn't tell anyone that he does aerobics on a Thursday, but here I am telling you. After the heart event, I gave Pierre the quartz he had asked for. I went over to Willie's where he alluded to something hiding in his secret room. I then tried to bribe him into telling me more secrets with this little daffodil, but it didn't work. That evening, I went into the mines to do some monster hunting, and in the process, I managed to find this little secret note which hinted at something hidden near the river in town. The next morning, I got a letter in the mail telling me about the egg festival. I also collected my last mini rotation of forage and finished work on my farm area. In town, I gave Haley a coconut. That afternoon, I went to the traveling merchant where I bought a tiger trout as well as a sunfish, which I could donate to the community center. While I was at it, I bought this amaranth to complete a quest that Marnie gave me like 3 million years ago. I went over to Marnie's where I gave her the amaranth and she gave me 500 gold in return, so all in all I lost 500 gold trying to complete this quest. After that I went down to the sewers to buy my second iridium sprinkler from Krobus. I then went to the community center and donated the 2 fish I bought from the traveling merchant. On the morning of day 13, I went into town where the egg festival was being held, and I bought a few decorations from Pierre's, including this little plush bunny. I got Lewis to start the egg hunt, and things were going well to begin with, but then I lost track of where I was going and only ended up with 12 eggs. So I didn't manage to beat the record from last year, which I'm pretty sure was 13, but I did win myself 1,000 monies. So all in all, not so bad. Back on the farm, I placed my decorations around before heading to bed. On day 14, I spent a little bit of time looking around for Haley, and when I eventually found her, I gave her this coconut for her birthday, which brought me up from 1 heart to 4. I went over to the secret woods, where I got a pentakill on these little slimes.
Pentakill!
Back at the farm, I finally got around to selling all the forageables I had been hoarding, so hopefully they'll bring in a lot of money because I really want to start upgrading my tools to iridium. I crafted a few wooden braziers and put them inside the bat cave, and that brings an end to week 2. With day 15, salmon season begins, and we all know how much I love that, and now, with the bear's knowledge that I received last season, it will be even more lucrative. I also accepted a quest from Evelyn to give her a leek. I collected all the berries on my farm and managed to find a leek as well, and I also found this little morel in the secret wood area that I didn't know existed. I went into town where I gave Evelyn this leek. I also dug up this strange doll that was hinted at in the secret note, which I then donated to the museum. For the rest of the day, I foraged around the valley and ended up with 249 salmon berries. After selling them, I went to bed and made over 7,000 monies on salmon berries alone. The next morning, I harvested my next rotation of crops and planted some more. In town, I accepted a quest to bring Sandy some Joja Cola, which gives me an excuse to visit Calico Desert and the Skull Cavern. Not much really happened that day, so after collecting the salmon berries, I went over to the mines where I found my first artifact trove. I've never actually found one of these before, so I'm very excited to see what it holds. The next morning, I bought a ticket to Calico Desert, where I gave Sandy her Joja Cola, and bought this painting, and outside I found this gold mask in a dig spot. Then I made my way into Skull Cavern. While I was in the cavern, I was swarmed by some ghosts and mummies. Each ghost dropped an Omni Geode, and after bombing some mummies, I managed to get my first cloth of the run. After spending a little bit of time in the cavern without finding too much success, I went back to the farm and headed to bed. On the morning of day 18, I awoke to find Emily at my door, who told me how to use cloth for tailoring, and gave me permission to use her sewing machine, so now I can put that blackberry cobbler to good use. I went over to Robin's where I bought a few houseplants and commissioned her to build me a mill. I do want to say that I know the mill is pretty useless without farming, but I'm building it for decorative purposes, so just trust me. I went into town where I accepted a quest to mine some copper ores for Clint. I then went over to the forge where I got Clint to break open my artifact trove, and inside there was a pearl. I didn't realize you could get pearls from anywhere other than the mermaid show, so this is pretty amazing. After that, I went over to the museum and donated my golden mask. Back at the farm, I laid out a few new pots and some fences and put up my new decorations in the house before calling it a day. An explosion was heard in the night, so I went looking around the farm where I found my second meteor. I broke it open and found another 6 iridium ore. There seems to be a pattern here, and the pattern is that meteors suck. I went over to the mines where I gathered some copper before heading over to Clint to turn them in. I went over to Krobus where I bought my 3rd iridium sprinkler. In Cindersap Forest, I found this note that hinted at someone waiting for me on level 100 of the Skull Cavern. So this will be one of the next goals I'll be working towards. Not that this is going to be easy at all, because I'd have to reach level 100 in one day, since Skull Cavern resets every day. On the morning of day 20, I read the news and found out that there would be a thunderstorm tomorrow. Finally! The first rain after literally 3 weeks. When I went outside, I found that my mill had been completed, so I set up a little decorative area around it to make it look pretty and nice. I quickly went over to Marnie's and purchased a few decorative hay bales and put them around my mill. I went into town and accepted a quest from Clint to do the unspeakable. I went over to the mines where I did the unspeakable, and so we shall not speak about it. The next morning I received a letter from Pierre requesting some sashimi, so I decided I was just going to give him the sashimi that Linus left me in my mailbox overnight. That probably came from the trash. It was also finally raining, so hopefully I'll end up with quite a few batteries. I then went into town where I gave Pierre the trishimi, which rewarded me with 1000 gold, and after that I went to the forge where I turned in Clint's quest and got him to upgrade my pickaxe to iridium. While I was walking through Cindersap Forest, I stopped at the traveling merchant and bought a parsnip and some duck mayonnaise. Apparently buying this parsnip completed the very first quest you get in Stardew, which is to harvest a parsnip. So I didn't know that was possible. I took my duck mayo over to the saloon and put it on this pedestal thingy, which gave me Pinky Lemon, so now I have 1 out of 3 of the Weird Boys. I also donated the parsnip to the community center, and back on the farm, I placed my new friend here between the trees and went to bed. The next morning, I witnessed lightning striking one of my lightning rods while I was busy placing tappers on some of my trees. In town, I accepted a job from Willie to collect 100 bug meat. I then went over to Jody's where I gave Vincent a gift. I went over to the mines where I started to hunt bugs, and while I was down there, I managed to find a monster floor, which is pretty lucky because now I can just reset the mine a bunch of times and get all the bugs I need. While I was resetting, I managed to find a few secret notes, one of which hinted at some kind of hidden treasure up near the bathhouse. On day 23, I went over to the forge and collected my iridium pickaxe. I went over to Jody's and gave Vincent another gift. Thrilling. I went over to the mines where I continued to hunt for bugs, and while I was there, I managed to complete the Monster Slayer goal for killing 60 rock crabs. So I went over to the Adventurers Guild where I retrieved this crab shell ring, which gives me +5 defense. For the remainder of the evening, I hunted bugs in the mine before heading home and calling it a day. Day 24 is the flower dance, so I did a few chores around the farm, including crafting a few crystallariums, as well as a few new furnaces, and after that I went down to the flower dance. At the dance, I asked Harvey to be my partner. He said yes, and this brought me up to a 10 heart friend level with him and also earned me the best friend achievement. Before I started the dance, I went to Pierre's stall and bought the tub of flowers recipe. At the dance, I kicked Maru to the corner and claimed my rightful place as prettiest girl at the dance, and that brings an end to day 24 and any potential relationship with Maru. On the morning of day 25, I found a letter in the mail from Mayor Lewis telling me about the mermaid pendant which can be given to someone to ask for their hand in marriage. And that is quite convenient because there is supposed to be some rain tomorrow, which means I can go to the beach and buy the pendant from the creepy sailor in the corner. I also received another letter from Harvey telling me to meet him by the railroad. I then collected my final harvest of the season, and in town I accepted a quest from Alex to give him a copper bar. I then made my way to the railroad. After sharing that romantic moment with Harvey, I can officially say that the second goal of this playthrough is complete. That evening I gave my bone mills a test run and ended up with 12 deluxe speed grow and 5 tree fertilizer. So, turns out these bone mills are really useful. On day 26, I went over to the mines and collected the last of the bug meat I needed for Willie's job. In town, I turned in the copper bar that Alex had requested before making my way over to Willie's shack, where I dropped off the bug meat. This earned me 3,000 monies. I then went into the sewers and bought my fourth and final iridium sprinkler. Now I can start saving up money for the star drop that Krobus sells. Back on the beach, I bought the mermaid pendant from the sailor, and now it is time to prepare my outfit for the wedding. So I went over to Pierre's, where I bought a bouquet, which can be used to craft the tuxedo shirt. On day 27, I found that my new rows of fruit trees were fully grown, just in time for summer. I then bought a bus ticket over to Calico Desert and went into Skull Cavern to look for some mummies, since they drop cloth when you kill them. This will allow me to tailor the clothes I need for my wedding with Harvey. While I was in the cavern, I managed to find a dinosaur floor and got a whole bunch of bone artifacts, which I could give into the museum. I also found my second dinosaur egg. I finally managed to find some mummies and got a piece of cloth, as well as this interesting looking fishing tackle called a curiosity lure. Not that this will do much good since I'm not allowed to fish, but anyway. Back at the farm, I reached level 10 combat and selected the brute profession for 15% more damage. On day 28, I went over to the museum and donated the 2 bone items I got from the dinosaurs, and it rewarded me with the second part of the sloth skeleton decoration. I then went and waited in the park for 12 o'clock when I searched through this bush and received the Junimo plush. I placed my Junimo plush in this little spot on the farm, as well as the sloth skeleton piece next to the other one in my room. I then went over to Emily's, where I tailored myself a little suit top. Over at the beach, I found Willie next to a pile of bug meat, and he taught me how to craft a quality bobber. And though it's not useful, it's the thought that counts. Over in Cindersap Forest, I bought this globe from the traveling merchant, and here we are at the end of spring. Now that we're here at the end of another video, I wanted to say thanks again for all the support. I wanted to also mention that you can follow me on Twitter, where I post announcements for upcoming videos. There's a link to that down in the description, and I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed playing it, and I'll see you all next time.